Welcome to the Primal Persistence Podcast, the podcast where I will give you health and fitness tips for your journey toward health and fitness through knowledge from me and guests that we both can learn from. So let's get started with the Primal Persistence Podcast. Enjoy. In this podcast, you will learn a lot about keto and living ketogenically and how to get into ketosis and all of this. This is a interview that I had with Danny Vega. Danny Vega is a power lifter and a full-on keto guy with 2 kids and here we talk a lot about different ways of using keto and how to use keto as a family and how to get into ketosis and use ketosis in your strive to being healthy and learning a lot more about health. So this is a fantastic show where I talk to Danny all things keto and health. So enjoy the show and tell other people about this show, and if you know anybody who likes more knowledge on keto, this is the fantastic show. Let's get started. Welcome, Danny. Thank you for being here. I would like to just let you know how thankful I am to have you on, and I'm a big fan of your podcast, and it's helped me a lot with a lot of valuable facts, and I hope I can deliver the same thing here with your help through some good questions and listening.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Let's start by asking a short introduction of who Danny is and how fantastic and why he is so fantastic in this space and everything.
So would you like me to kind of give a little background on myself?
Yeah, so people know who you are and what you do and why we are speaking. It's especially because of the keto, but your background in training as well.
Sure. So I started off as a football player, American football. And, I did really well in Miami, Florida. I was a leading rusher in Dade County and went on to play college football at Columbia University, New York. And then after that, I couldn't stay away from kind of the sports and nutrition and physiology side of things. So I went to the University of Florida and I got my master's degree in human performance, which is basically in the School of Applied Physiology and Kinesiology. And so that's where I actually was a grad assistant in the weight room. I started off with the football team for about 5 months. And then the rest of my 2 years there, I was in the basketball facility, and that's where I designed programs for men's and women's golf, men's and women's tennis, and I assisted with the basketball team. And right as I was about to graduate, we won the national championship, and our assistant head coach got offered a job at Virginia Commonwealth University. And so it was perfect timing, and he took me over with him, and he created a position for me. We didn't really have a specific strength and conditioning coach at VCU until I got there. And when we got there, we changed, pretty much everything. We changed the culture. We changed it to a high tempo and up tempo style of play. I brought in a bunch of new modalities and new training methods that we did. I monitored the volume of practice, and there was just a bunch of stuff that we did that was new that led to a lot of success. So we actually, the first year that we were there, we had the best record in school history, in the conference history, and then we went to the NCAA tournament and we beat Duke, which obviously it's when you're talking about playing against Duke, they hadn't lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament since like 1984. So we had a lot of success there. After a while at VCU, I decided that I wanted to just completely switch careers. Just because I wanted to come back home to Miami. So I started off in pharmaceutical sales, and then I went on to medical device sales. But I've always stayed involved. So I competed in powerlifting, and that's where in the United States, I hit the top 25 in the 220 weight class. It'll be the 100 kilo weight class here, with a 1700 total. And from there, I kind of discovered keto because I had torn a meniscus, and I was kind of moving away from powerlifting and trying to figure out ways to get healthier. And I started keto June of 2016, and just had a bunch of success with that. I ran my first half marathon in February of this year. And I reached out to Brian Williamson, who's actually the keto evangelist, and he has an awesome podcast. And I said, listen, if you're ever going to do anything with athletes, let me know. I'd love to get involved. And it's funny because right when I reached out to him, he was already deciding that he was going to do the Ketogenic Athlete podcast. So he interviewed me, and I was his first interview. And we hit it off so well that after the interview, we spoke for like a half an hour, and he's like, can you be my co-host? And that just kind of threw me off. And so I talked to my wife about it, and then we got excited, and we've been together hosting the podcast, I think, since like August of last year. And so, our whole goal, Brian has 3 podcasts. He has Keto Evangelist, which is aimed at kind of looking at all the therapeutic uses of the ketogenic diet and how it can, heal people. And then he has Keto Evangelist Kitchen with Carrie Brown, where they basically help people figure out how to cook properly and how to, live a ketogenic lifestyle and have the right foods in the kitchen. And our goal with the Ketogenic Athlete podcast is to just kind of look at all the different ways that the ketogenic diet can improve performance. So that's really what we've been trying to do. And of course, we have KetoCon coming up in September of this year in Austin, Texas, and we'll be bringing more people to talk about performance, and we'll combine the science and with like the stories of people. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. It sounds very, very, very well, and a lot of training history there. That's some of the questions I have for you as well. My first question here is training history, but that we've a little been over the powerlifting. How was this transition from being a carb-dependent athlete, which is pretty normal in powerlifting, and then moving to keto?
That's a good question. So like the first thing that I'll say is I always talk to my friends, and I'm as real as it gets when it comes to this. People ask me, can you get strong on a ketogenic diet? Before I answer that, first, this is what I'm going to say. If you want to start the ketogenic diet, you want to have to figure out, why are you doing it? A lot of people in powerlifting, unfortunately, they can't sleep without a CPAP, a basic machine because they basically have sleep apnea. There's a lot of health issues. There's a ton of inflammation. People are constantly pushing their bodies way past, a point of health, and because when you have, 800, 900 pounds on your back, it's no longer about health. It's about absolute strength, and you're trying to minimize the damage that you're doing. So, that takes a toll on your body. And so what I would say is, if you're trying to start the ketogenic diet, there's a few reasons that I have seen with my powerlifter friends that are really good reasons for doing it. One would be reducing inflammation. So you want to basically take a long off season to heal and start the ketogenic diet. You have 3 or 4 months where you can commit yourself to not compete, because the problem is we all want to just continue to compete, and we see the people in our weight class, and we see them getting stronger, and we want to keep up with them. But sometimes it's important to kind of step back and take some time off to do that. So one would be healing. The next one would be, improve your body composition. People think that just because you're bigger, you're going to be stronger. But here's the thing. You're in a sport that has weight classes. So if you can be stronger in a lower weight class, not only will you be healthier, you'll look better, you'll feel better. So a lot of people will to do that to improve their body composition. And then the third reason would be just because you have a bad relationship with food, and a lot of powerlifters have a really bad relationship with food. We do 20-pound cuts, 15-pound cuts, and then the best part about the cut is if you have a 24-hour weigh-in, you have 24 hours to basically bloat yourself up, and the goal is to put on more weight than you lost. So it's not uncommon for someone to cut 20 pounds and put on 25 pounds in a day. So you're just basically eating and binging. So I've had friends who've basically done the ketogenic diet and basically reset their relationship with food. And so from there, okay, you can stick with the ketogenic diet or not. I personally think it's the best way. I think that it takes patience to to get back to where you were. But now to the question of how the training kind of changed, I was already moving away from powerlifting, and I was already focusing more on kind of a more bodybuilding style approach. And so I've been focused much more now for the first time in my life, being an athlete. I've been focused on looking better, and I used to always be like, when I thought of people who train just to look good, I thought, what, that's not functional. But at the same time now, I've gotten a respect for these people who basically put their bodies, they build and sculpt their bodies. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to shrink my waist from years of having, over 600 pounds on my back and 700 pounds deadlift. I'm trying to shrink that down. But what I'll say is the first month or so, here's what happened with me. And I can kind of tell people what I think is the best way to do it. When I started the ketogenic diet, I had just dieted for 3 months doing a standard bodybuilding type diet. So when I realized that my meniscus was torn, I got my MRI results, and I had to pull out of my last meet. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to focus on just getting lean. So I had a bodybuilder friend of mine who was also a powerlifter, and he wrote me a diet, and it was a typical, diet where you would start with the carbs were pretty high, and the fat was low from the beginning. And then as time went on, the carbs went down and the fat stayed low. And, by the end, I was really lean and I was really miserable. And so then I was like, let me switch it up. So when I started keto, it just so happens that I was really, really busy. So the first week I didn't train at all because I had to catch up with work. So that actually worked out really well because I didn't even know, I didn't experience any bad training that first week because I didn't train at all. And then the second week of keto, I actually was scheduled to do a deload week. As part of, my whole training philosophy is my mentor is Brian Carroll, who he's, one of the best powerlifters in the world. He's got a lot of world records, and he has a philosophy called 10-20 life. And I'm part of his team. He sponsors me. We have a website called powerrackstrength.com where we publish articles and, we sell literature, and we publish our training logs. And one of the important things about our philosophy is we build in our deloads. We don't wait until we're tired or beat up to take a lighter week, or take a week with less volume. So the second week was just so happened to be scheduled deload. So the second week, I felt good. The weight was light, so I didn't really struggle. And then the third week, what I noticed was that, as I started training, full strength again, the weight was still kind of light. I didn't go full, the full weight, but I wasn't really having any pumps. I just looked like more wiry and kind of more skinny. And I just didn't have any pumps. There wasn't a lot of crazy, blood flow to my muscles. There was blood flow, but it was just my glycogen was completely gone. So I really felt I felt good at about a month, and about 3 months in was when I feel like my body really started to, produce the glycogen it needed for the hypertrophy style training. And ever since then, it's been over a year, and the type of training that I do is extremely intense. And if you look at a video of me training now versus a video of me training over a year ago when I was eating carbs, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, So I'm just as lean, and actually I'm leaner now than I was back then, definitely. But my pumps are still there. My strength is there. I'm not training as heavy, but So if people are committed to keto, you will get stronger and you will build muscle, but you have to be patient and go through that period where you're gonna probably feel weaker. If you're an endurance athlete, your times are gonna feel slower. You're gonna feel zapped, but it all comes back.
Fantastic. I just gotta say one thing. It was very cool of you to have a busy week that first week, because I didn't when I went keto. It was just I said I might just cut off one training day, and then I'm just that's got to be enough. But it wasn't. It was a whole month of
Were you
struggle.
miserable? It was miserable.
Yeah. In my training, I was very miserable, but overall, it went quite fast. I've been very low carb for a long time, quite paleo-like, because I've done a lot of endurance training before. So I thought that it helped me a little, but still, when I went in and did my strongman CrossFit style functional training, it just beat me up like hell. I had no going on pulse. I was just training in the black hole training all the time. So it was very hard on me, and for no reason. And I've learned a lot from it, cutting back and seeing what I've done to my clients as well, setting some people up for keto.
So you were not only adapting to the new diet, but you were also overtraining.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So you jump in with both feet and dive hell, and that's what I'm trying to teach my clients not to do.
Yes, and I'll tell you with personal experience, I had a friend of mine who he's one of these guys who he does everything. Like he's a very strong raw power lifter. He's a very strong equipped power lifter. He's run his biggest was 100K. That was his longest race. So good ultra endurance runner. And what we did, he decided he wanted to do a bodybuilding contest. So we started him off at 100 carbs a day, and with the fat higher, kind of more similar to paleo. And then I cut his carbs over a period of 3 months. And what ended up happening was that he got stronger over that period of 3 months. He didn't go through any of that initial strength loss. So that's a really interesting lesson for me. Personally, I wouldn't have been able to do it because I'm just the type of person, like, I want to do keto. I'm going to do keto now. So, but with him, it worked out really well. And then we brought him all the way down to 50. We kept him down at 50 for a long time. He was doing well. And then towards the end, when we were really getting him lean, he was down to like 20 carbs a day. And, we kept the fat high, and we knocked down the protein. So there's definitely something to be said about taking your time. And I think, I hate to generalize, but I think with women, that's a really good approach, because I've found with a lot of the women that I know, it takes them longer to adapt. So it may even be a better experience for them if you do it slow.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of things I've learned with going into the primal blueprint. They teach a lot of this with the carbs and cutting a little bit back. So I normally now, as you say, I've tested it with a couple of clients, going to a low carb style diet and high fat, and then slowly transition, if they would like and see the gain, to go into a full keto.
Yeah, I really like the flexibility of the primal style. Like that's what I love about Brad and Mark, is that they're very, they're realistic, they're flexible. Personally, I know for a fact that keto works the best for me, because I didn't even go through the keto flu, and my body was like, this is what we want to do. But I also know that when Brian and I talk about, being descriptive versus prescriptive, and we harp on that, because we describe what we know works for us, and it may not work for other people. And so just because, you're ketogenic and I'm like, for me, I'll give an example. When I do total carbs, when I count total carbs versus net carbs, I see a huge difference. And I see like my ketones almost double when I go off of total carbs. And if it was just the ketones doubling and nothing else, I wouldn't really care. But the fact is that I feel better. I feel like I burn more fat. And so if I'm keeping my total carbs, and this is, 100 kilogram male who trains extremely hard, 5-6 days a week, doing, intense activity, I feel really good. And then before I had my carbs at 35 to 50, and I was just getting, and I was doing net carbs, keeping net carbs under 25. There was a big difference for me. But then at the same time, if I were to focus on more of the endurance stuff that I've done on and off for the past, several months, then, it may be beneficial for me to bring the carbs back up. But just from what I'm doing now, it just, total carbs is better for me. But I don't tell people, do total carbs versus net carbs. I kind of share my experience. And people, when you are doing well, they're going to ask you, what are your macros? What are you doing? And I always tell them, well, this is what I'm doing. You can try it, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you.
Yeah, I like the go by feeling. I meet a lot of people and see a lot of people, and it works very well for me as well. I'm not so good, as I know you are very good at tracking everything. And
I'm just OCD.
I cannot do that. Yeah, but it works for you, and it doesn't work for a lot of other people. I have some bodybuilding style clients that's been used to this. They really love this. They've been doing it for 10, 15 years, and it's exciting. And I just say, then let's keep on doing this, because it's not because I don't want to do it. If it works for you, it works for you.
Yeah, some people, it's like it's the most annoying thing ever. Like my wife she hates that, and it sounds like you're not a fan either, and that's totally cool. That is totally cool.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan when it fits in, but when I'm just living my everyday life as I am right now, and I just go for my training, and I don't have any specific goal right now, then I don't do it. But when I really need something, then I'm too much of a nutrition nerd then I just still need to know where I can tweak. It's a lot easier tweaking when I'm tracking, because I know where I was yesterday and the day before.
Yes, that's a really good point.
So, and that's what I use for a lot of people as well. You have answered a whole lot of my questions here, but I have one: the low carb, high fat versus keto. We talked a little about this going slowly in.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on a very low carb diet? Is a keto diet, but what's in between? What do you think? Is it going by feel, or if we're talking normally healthy people, everyday soccer moms? And
so I will say this, like, based on what I've learned, for instance, from like, if you are someone who's really focused on preserving as much muscle as possible while being in a caloric deficit. So like, let's say you were to take, like either a low carb diet that doesn't quite get you into ketosis, or even a ketogenic diet that cycles carbs in every now and then, versus like a strict ketogenic diet. If you were to take, the ketogenic diet group versus like either the low carb group, that's, not quite, there's not really that many ketones present, or a cyclical ketogenic diet. If you're in that caloric deficit and you're trying to lose fat, it seems like, from what we've seen with the research that Dr. Wilson's done and some of the other stuff, it seems like the ketogenic diet has a bigger advantage, because the ketones, what we think is happening, at least what they think is happening, is that the ketones are really protective of the muscle, because we know that from other studies that the bioavailability of amino acids are improved, they're increased by as much as 50% with the ketogenic diet. So if you're in a deficit and you're already at risk of having to produce extra energy through gluconeogenesis, and you're losing some of that protein, well, you have those ketones that will be able to lead to that effect of sparing your muscle. So I think like if you're dieting, it would seem like a ketogenic diet would be much better at protecting the muscle. So, because what they saw was they had two groups, bodybuilders that were both in a deficit, and they cycled carbs in once a week for one group, and they kept it, low, ultra low carb ketogenic for the other group. They both lost the same amount of weight, but the cyclical group, lost muscle, and the ketogenic group didn't. So in that case, I would say the ketogenic diet is probably better. I would say that for someone who does like obstacle races or endurance events, I would think that the perfect combination for a lot of people would be kind of a more primal, low carb approach. And, every now and then, testing your ketones, seeing you very well may be in ketosis. Let's say you have a 10-mile run. And on that 10-mile run, you consume 50 carbs or 40 carbs from like some sweet potatoes. Chances are you're going to burn through those carbs. Your body is always going to preferentially burn through those carbs as energy. And if you're going for a 20-mile run and you consume something like 40 to 60 carbs again, you're probably going to go right through those. And 2 hours later, you could be back in ketosis. So, distance runners are extremely fat adapted. And so, it all depends. You really have to play with different fuel sources and see, like, some people do well with, almond butter or, oils or fats as fuel. But then, it all depends on every person. You may have GI distress from some of these oils, or you may have, other issues. So, our friend Carlos, we have on our podcast, we're going to have an N of 1 experiments episode. And, Carlos is the ultra guy, and he, does 100, 200, 200-mile races. It's interesting with him is like what he found is the best combination for him is low protein, very low protein, like under 10%, with the carbs closer to 10%. And then the fat still extremely high, like at 80%. He's found that for him, that is the best combination. So that just goes to show like how important it is to really take some time and try each approach out and see which one works best for you.
Well, that's very nice advice. I've never heard that one with that low protein and high carb. Sounds like a very cool. I got to try that one out.
Yeah.
Then my very important question, because a lot of the people that I work with are family people and with kids and everything. So what are your thoughts on keto in a family, and especially what do you do with your kids? Do you serve only keto for them, or do they get carbs as well?
Oh man, that's a great question. So our biggest philosophy, like in life, just forget about keto, just in general, is we're all about, personal freedom. And so we live in a household where we are all about living in partnership with our children. We're against kind of the authoritarian style of parenting. We just find that, when everyone works together and realizes that, they're treated with respect and they have their personal autonomy, that's kind of the main goal for us. And then at the same time, we're going to always be speaking about, what we do with them and teaching them, as well as modeling the right behavior with them. So I always tell people, like, let's say you want your kid to be healthy. It starts with you. Look at yourself in the mirror and see where you're at. Like, how do you feel about your health? How do you feel about the way you look, the way you feel? Is this how you want your child to look and feel? And if the answer is yes, then that's awesome. But your child has to have autonomy, because their drive for freedom and autonomy is so strong that it can lead them to do things that are against their best interests. Like, for instance, if a kid, let's say you put a strict bedtime with them, and every time, even if they're not tired, you make them go to sleep at that time. The first time they go on a sleepover or something, they're going to stay up all night. And they're going to feel terrible the next day, but they're going to stay up all night just because they can stay up all night. So that's the thing. Like we want to give our kids, autonomy, and at the same time, when it comes to buying things for the house and doing groceries, we're not gonna, voluntarily with our money buy them crappy food. My son, my 6 year old, I have a 6 year old and a 3 year old. Um, right now, the 6 year old gets $10 a week to spend on himself at the grocery store, like with whatever he wants to buy. And sometimes he'll buy good stuff, sometimes he'll buy bad stuff, but we always try to start their day with a good ketogenic meal, and that usually helps a lot. We don't worry about the time of day, we don't worry about it's lunchtime, it's dinner time. We basically just wait until they tell us they're hungry. So that's a huge thing for us, because when you live well, also we have the freedom because our kids don't go to school. So they have the freedom to go to school anytime they want. We're kind of very hippie and weird like that. If my son ever wanted to go to school, he can go at any time, but I would just tell him that if they tell him to do anything he doesn't want to do, don't do it. So I think I know it's crazy, but so basically, like, we'll start the day with, my son loves egg yolks. And so the funny thing is that the other one will eat the rest of the egg. So we'll make him fried eggs, and then we'll make them both like thick sliced bacon. They love avocado with lots of salt. So usually, like, in the morning, they'll have a nice fatty breakfast, and then a lot of the times they won't eat lunch. And unless they're hungry, and then if that's the case, a lot of the times my wife tells me they don't eat until like 2 or 3. And I'm not gonna lie, every now and then, for convenience, my wife has to go drive through and get them something from a fast food restaurant. We try to minimize that as much as possible, but overall, we want them to be low carb. We want them to eat real food, but then at the same time, we want them to have a healthy relationship with food, and we want them to do all of these things because they chose to do it, not because we made them do it. So that's kind of how we look at it. Of course, my wife is fully ketogenic like me, so I think it's super important. I feel really bad for people who don't have the support of their partners, or at least the understanding of their partners when it comes to the way that we eat, because I know people that are just, for instance, a friend of mine who will text me and say, my husband is saying that I'm going to have, all these issues with my, with my heart because of the fats. And I just say, listen, do not fight about this stuff. This is, you have way too many other things in life for you to be fighting about diet. Just try to figure out a way that you both can live in the same house and live in harmony, because at the end of the day, it's just food. But unfortunately, it can get pretty crazy when you don't have the support of your partner.
Yeah, especially when you throw kids into the mix. What should the kids eat?
Yeah, exactly. That can you imagine? Then, like, one is saying, "Well, you're giving them all this fat." That's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, it is. And I am in a household where my wife is not keto, but she's super understanding, and she doesn't need to be in any keto. She has super control over her weight. She never tracks anything, and she just goes by feel. It's crazy. Now I'm a little up in weight, she'll say, and then she'll just cut her carbs or cut her calories, and then boom, she's back to where she was a week later. It's very fantastic to see. A couple of years ago, I put her on the bulletproof diet with the butter coffee in the morning, and she
Awesome.
lost like 4 kilos in 6 days. And then
Wow.
I don't want to do this anymore. She has a fantastic body. What every nutrition thing means, it's fantastic to see. She can do anything, but she's very open. So when I'm eating all of this fat, she just said, but when she likes her pasta, and it's okay with me, as long as I don't eat, I get some cabbage or whatever, and eat it that way instead. And then So I'm quite lucky in that front, but I have a lot of clients working that have the exact same problem where the one you're gonna die, blah blah blah, and it's very bad. And so I think this will help a lot of people with it, and I don't think it's crazy. I think it's fantastic that you could do that with your kids. I would love that was a possibility for us as well. Homeschooling, especially in Denmark and in Europe, is a thing that's very unheard of. It's very seldom that you hear about people doing it.
Yeah, I know that. I don't know of the specific countries except for Germany. I think Germany, I've heard, is very restrictive. But other than that, I don't know. Like the Nordic countries in Northern Europe, I don't know how kind of how they look at it up there.
No, here we're it's not. They're a very good schooling system. So I don't think that it's anything that's get brought up that often.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's the other thing. You know, the
Yeah.
education system here is really, really bad. So you really have to try to figure out, you know, how your child is going to succeed when you can't really depend on our education system. I've only heard very good things about, you know, these European countries. A lot of them, you know, a lot of them are ranked much higher than us, and we spend a lot more on education. But it's not really on educating the kids. It's just a bunch of other stuff. So it's sad, but
Yeah. How do you, just a quick question, how do your kids react? So when they get a high carb meal, do they have any effects or reactions to it?
again, this is another really good question because we always like to ask them questions. We really feel like asking questions is the best way to kind of get people to think, you know, and you know, if my 6-year-old eats poorly for a few days in a row, he'll start having accidents. He has less control of his bowels. He's things like that, and then that's when it's a perfect opportunity to be like, you know, what do you think this could be? Where did this come from? Oh, well, you know, I ate this, and well, you know, that has wheat in it. Oh yeah, it does has wheat, and, you know, and then he'll start to tell me things. You know, one thing that we noticed really early on with my son is that he cannot tolerate food dyes. Food dyes make him especially red, turn him into a wild animal. You know, he just blacks out, you know, and so certain types of foods, you know, make him feel different. And so if both of them eat a big cake or something, like my 3-year-old's birthday, we got him a cake with like Moana, the Disney movie, and it had sugar in it, a bunch of sugar. They were both going crazy, you know, for like an hour after. And so, like I said, we just kind of asked them questions and really try to get them to pay attention to what happens to their bodies when they do certain things. Because when you're a kid who eats healthy most of the time and eats real food, you can actually feel the difference. You know, that's the thing that's such a difference between the way we eat and the typical Western diets. A lot of the Western diets that you see is that people aren't really aware of how terrible they feel. I can tell you before I went paleo, before I went keto, I would tell people, no, I feel fine. I feel great. And I would be able to eat a bunch of fast food and not feel a thing. And if I do that now, I'll feel terrible because I feel like one of the first things I told Brian was that carbs are noise, you know, and they're just background noise that once your body is kind of used to consuming them, you kind of don't feel the differences. But now if you eat real food, you can feel the difference if you cut out dairy and see what happens, or you cut out nuts, or you do certain things, you change the type of fats that you eat, you can feel the differences. So we kind of really try to get them to pay attention to what happens to their body when they eat different foods.
Fantastic. I think very valuable information you're delivering. I love it. And then my question, this is maybe a little bit personal question as well. Do you test ketones, and what are your thoughts on testing for ketones?
Yeah, I love doing all types of testing. I've always been a big like data geek. You know, there's headsuphealth.com is a free website that's pretty awesome that you could put in your medical records. You can put in a bunch of stuff, like if you use the ketonics, if you use a blood ketone meter, if you use, there's a bunch of different things that you can enter, and then you can even kind of track. They have graphs that you can put different data points, and you can see, like, let's say you put in your MyFitnessPal, and you connect your MyFitnessPal app, which is a calorie tracking app, and you can see, okay, this day I ate more carbs. Look at where my ketones were. My ketones dropped, or things like that. And so I personally do love testing. I don't do it too often, because if I do it too often, my wife gets mad at me, because, you know, the strips are expensive. So I'll usually test my ketones once or twice a week, and before I drop my carbs down under 35, you know, my readings would be anywhere from like 1 to 1.9, and now they're anywhere from like 2 to 4.6, 4.5, you know, depending on the time of day. Like last night, I just decided to test. This is the first time I tested this week, and, you know, they were 2.1 at night. So it all depends. Like if you're just testing them to test them, then, you know, I don't know if it's really worth it, especially if you feel good and you're fat adapted. But for me, I'm trying to see, like, okay, my carbs are low. We're doing weekly changes to my diet, because I'm trying to get down to 6% body fat right now. And so for that reason, I'm doing tracking. But yeah, I think tracking is great.
And then tracking, you said blood strips. What are your thoughts on the ketonics? Is the one mostly used for breath, I think. And I don't even want to talk about the P strips.
I loved the ketonics at first, because it was a one-time purchase. And once I got a baseline of where my ketones were, like for instance, I knew that if I was in the mid 40s to like low 60s, on the ketonics, I knew that I was, you know, pretty much in ketosis. You know, I think you're still considered in ketosis under that certain point. But my only problem, and now they have a different software, which I don't think we've updated the software yet, where the whole type of what what it's measuring, it's a whole different type, so it's like a different number. But my problem is I couldn't compare. I couldn't get any. There's still not enough data to say, you know, what is good with the ketonics. And so, like, if you're looking at research, and you're seeing, like, for instance, Finney and Volek suggests that 0.5 millimolar to 3.0 is, you know, nutritional ketosis. And so if you look at that, you're able to say, okay, I'm within that range, and you know, I'm in ketosis. But you don't really have that data on the ketonics. So, and there's really, people have tried to find correlations, but there's really no correlations between the ketonics that we know of, at least, between the ketonics and the blood. So it all depends on you. Like, if you're okay with not quite knowing, you would basically have to really, with the ketonics, start testing yourself often at the beginning, and then really get a good idea of what your baselines are, like in the morning, what your baselines are in the evening. And then if you change anything, then you would be able to compare that to your baseline. But then you wouldn't be able to look at data or compare yourselves to other people, which is probably a good thing, because you know, ketones are so individualized. Like, and that's one thing that Brian spoke to Dr. Finney, and he was like asking him, you know, where did you get these numbers from? What, you know, in his mind, Brian was already thinking, these numbers may be arbitrary. You know, they may be not as important as people think, you know, because a lot of people, they are consistently like in 0.4 millimolars, let's say, and they are extremely lean. They feel great. They operate well. If you were to look at like any type of way of measuring like the energy that they use, you'd be able to see that they're fat adapted, but their body has 0.4 ketones in their blood when they measure it. So he basically said, look, this is what we found with the people that were healthy and losing weight and losing fat and burning fat, this is the range that we found. So basically what that means is you can very well be in ketosis and be under 0.5, but it's just, individualized to you. Some people walk around, they'll test any time of the day and they'll have like 3.5 millimolar. So it's probably good to not compare yourself to other people.
Fantastic. That's a lot of the questions that I get, especially from I've gotten the new ketonics and I've used it for my clients as well, but I've used it especially for myself. That's why I bought it. And it's been a very hard time for me. I don't know if I'm not blowing hard enough or doing it the right way. But when I compared, as you said, we cannot do this, but when I compare to my blood strips, I have a very hard time getting into as deep ketosis as you are talking about. I'm lying just around 1.0. That's 1.2 is the highest I've ever been in after 28 hours of fasting. And it's very hard for me to get all the way higher. So it's very nice to hear that it's that individual. And I can use that a lot. And a lot of the questions that I get is about the testing when they're going keto.
Yeah. That's just basically like, I would just say is just tell them to try to figure out what their baseline is and then try to compare that baseline to future readings and see like where they are there, Okay. That's pretty much it.
And then the last question before we get into the good ending stuff is, what's your thoughts on exogenous ketones? They're expensive like hell here in Denmark, but I've never used them, and I just would like to hear your thoughts on using them if not.
Yeah. So I know that there's no question that there's a ton of research on exogenous ketones and like the therapeutic uses, but most of us are not in that situation where we have, epilepsy or other diseases that would require us to be on a super therapeutic keto diet where it's like, not less than 10% protein and barely any carbs and mostly fat, and that would need exogenous ketones. So I have a problem with the whole marketing of ketones to people and saying that, they're going to burn more fat or they're going to lose weight, or because then it becomes a magic, powder or, a magic drink. And unfortunately that's how it's being marketed with some people. But for me, it took me like 8 or 9 months before I said, you know what, let me decide to do an experiment. And the only reason I did it was someone showed me there was an Indiegogo campaign for a company here in the United States that was basically starting up, and they were the first that I saw that had, 3 different, they had calcium, sodium, and magnesium that they were all pairing with the ketones, and they were in liquid form, and it looked like something that I was interested in. So I invested in their campaign, and I ended up getting like 72 bottles of it. So for a super cheap price. So I was like, okay, this is perfect. I'm gonna do an experiment on this, and since I'm going to be in a caloric deficit for a long period of time, trying to get to 6%, I know that I may need some extra energy. And so I am fairly sure that personally, for me, it's really helping as a pre-workout. So, what I'll do is I wake up at 4 o'clock a.m. I'm supposed to wake up at 4:30, but my body's always like up at 4. And so the first thing I'll do is I'll have a big keto coffee where I'll have like a tablespoon of MCT oil, a tablespoon of butter, a tablespoon of coconut oil, and a scoop of MCT oil powder in it. And I'll drink that. And then right around when it's time to leave, like at 5:30, I'll have my pre-workout, which is basically the exogenous ketones drink. It's a bottle. And I mix that with something called Zip Fizz, which is like a little powdered, tiny little thing that comes in individual packets that is basically 50 milligrams of caffeine, And the most potassium that I've seen in a supplement, it has like 900 milligrams, which is great. And it's got a few other electrolytes, and then 1 gram of L-carnitine, liquid L-carnitine. And so that's kind of my pre-workout, and then I'll go lift in.
Yeah. I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. Well, now you'll have to learn how to do some editing.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay. So, where did you lose me? Where I was talking about the
Yeah,
pre-work.
we were going to the pre-workout with the small sip bag. What do
Yeah,
you
the
call
Zip Fizz. Okay,
it? Yeah,
yeah.
sip is.
And then the L-carnitine. And so basically, what I find is that with the intense training that I'm doing, basically ketones are just a form of energy. Carbohydrate is energy, fat is energy. And so I find personally that for my purposes right now, where I'm in a caloric deficit and I'm want to train hard, these ketones are definitely providing me with extra energy. That's where I have the specific use that I like them for, and they may be useful for distance runners too. The only way to find out is to try it. You would have to try it on yourself. If you were doing something else, using a different form, where let's say you were using like a resistant starch, like a UCAN super starch or something like that, and compare it do like an experiment on yourself and see how it goes. That's kind of how I feel about ketones. I definitely don't think that they're necessary, and I definitely don't think people should just be drinking them throughout the day for no reason. There's absolutely no reason for that, because um, they go back and forth. Some people would say that it stops endogenous ketone production. I don't think that's the case for me personally, because I'll take it as a pre-workout like at 5:30 in the morning, and if I test at night and my ketones are 3 millimolar, then they're out of your system. If you look at like what usually happens is they can raise your blood ketones by like 1 to 1.5 millimolar, but 2 hours later, your ketones are just under the baseline. So like if your ketone baseline was like at 8 a.m., let's say it was 1.0, and then you test yourself an hour later after consuming exogenous ketones, and they're like at 2.3. But then what you'll see is like 2 hours later, they'll be like at 0.8. So there is a little bit drop under baseline, but then as the day goes on, your body will continue to produce ketones again. So at night, my ketones are fine. So my only thing with those is just know why you're taking them, and if you're going to do an experiment, try it and see if it works for you.
But you wouldn't recommend anybody to use them as they are marketed as a faster way to get into ketosis, and a lot of these companies do this marketing stunt where, well, you can get into ketosis and just take this, blah blah. And what's your thought on that part for soccer
That's
moms and everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the beginning, if people have extra money lying around and they want to, in the beginning, try the ketones so they can see how it feels to be in ketosis. I don't see the need. It all depends on, do you have extra money that you want to just, you know, use to try it? But I personally don't really think it's necessary. But my whole thing is, you know what, if you want to try it. And, but don't use it as a crutch, because there's nothing better than, a well-formulated ketogenic diet. There's nothing better than that, that base that you're building, and that lifestyle change.
Fantastic, Danny. It's been a wealth of knowledge for me here, and I love the way you think and structure all of this, and that is why I would like your help to get more of this fantastic knowledge out to other people. Do you have any suggestions for guests I should have on?
Oh man. Yeah, gosh, it all depends on, the type of, guests you want to have. Obviously, Brad Kearns is great. I could always put you in touch with Carlos Donas.
That I would love.
All right. I am
Okay, we're back.
Yeah, it said my connection was unstable, so I just left the meeting and came back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah. The good thing too, of course, it's always good to have guests, but if, you could always think about different, topics that would be of interest. I know that you kind of mentioned when you talked to me about, OCR, and we haven't really had anybody on that does that stuff. Of course, we'd love to have Ben Greenfield, but he's a big guy, so we'll
Yeah, yeah. I have a schedule for Ben, but it's in October, so it's a little. He set me up with his. I've been following Ben and been in the endurance world for a while, so I've got some touch in there, but he's got a very busy schedule, so I had to wait till October.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, but yeah, he would be great if that's
Yeah.
what your interest is.
But
Um,
it's just as much health and the things you've been talking about, and the episode you did with your wife gave a lot of insight on general health and life as well. And I think that the low carb keto lifestyle is fantastic for people that would just like to be more healthy, and that's what I'm working with and trying to help people that way.
oh yeah, there's one more person. Found My Fitness, the Found My Fitness podcast. Oh geez, what's her name now? She's a PhD. She actually, we want to have her on as well. And she's really fantastic because she's been doing a lot of research. Her name's Dr. Rhonda Patrick,
Hmm?
and she's done a lot of research, and she's done some focus on sauna and how sauna can assist with hypertrophy. She had a Finnish doctor on her podcast recently, and he's been able to show that sauna use, I think it's the minimum 3 to 4 days a week for a minimum of 19 minutes, actually improves cardiovascular health and reduces cardiovascular risk. So she's definitely someone that I think would be great. She's someone that I want to reach out to. I've been doing sauna personally for the past month consistently, and I've seen awesome benefits. And I don't know about if Denmark is like Norway. Do you guys do a lot of sauna there?
Nope, we don't.
Well, I know that they do a lot of sauna in countries around you, and
They do.
yeah, it's definitely something that I'm interested in, and how heat shock proteins, how they affect us and how they can help. It's kind of a stress response, and it's really interesting stuff. So anything like that, new research on things that we hadn't thought about before is always interesting to me.
Yeah, and I've been talking to Ben Greenfield a lot as well, and his thoughts on infrared saunas I think is very
Oh
cool.
yeah, I know he has one in his house, I think, right?
Yeah, he does, and he does workouts in there and everything. It's very cool.
Yep.
I have two things that I would like to ask people your before we end the podcast is your best health tips and your best training tips
Okay.
for everybody, like being the people that are getting this is people that are doing a healthy lifestyle and would like to get some more adventure into their life via the OCR as we spoke about.
Yeah. So the first thing is when it comes to, when you're thinking about doing new things, trying new things, try one thing at a time. If you're gonna start intermittent fasting, don't start intermittent fasting and doing something else new. Um, you know, Only don't force anything. Listen to your body, because you may be seeing something that someone else is doing and it seems like a good idea, but if it doesn't feel right, then it doesn't really work for you. Don't do that. Of course, when it comes to training, my thing is always listen to your body, and be honest with yourself, and don't ever push yourself too far. I think that a lot of people are very impatient and they want to have results, and unfortunately that slows them down even more. So that would be my biggest thing, is to listen to your body and just remember that this whole health thing, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's one of those things where you're gonna, as time goes on, a lot of stuff will happen naturally. And so, you may find that you're just naturally intermittent fasting. That's what happened to my wife. So just let it happen naturally and let your body adjust to everything. And that's how you're going to live, a healthy lifestyle that's sustainable.
Perfect, fantastic. I just have one follow-up for the training. What are your thoughts on strength? I use a lot with all my clients to build a very strong foundation of strength, because that's what I see both with health and with fitness that a lot of people are missing. So this great, just standard for you, natural health strength base where you can do squats, you can do deadlifts, just super simple body weight stuff and stuff like this. What are your thoughts on the everyday people getting more strength into their life instead of a lot of the Danish people? Oh, I need to do something healthy, and they go out for a run, even though they're 200 kilos and beating up their knees and hip like I don't know what.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it this way, like imagine multiplying your body weight times the amount of reps that you do when you're doing like a distance run versus, putting, a bar on your back and doing a squat for 10 reps. There's no question that the volume is much more. But the benefits that you get from lifting weights are they don't stop when you leave the gym. They continue throughout the day, and so I think that the cornerstone of any healthy program is going to be lifting. Of course, I'm very biased because I've always been more on the lifting side of things and, sprinting. And I've only recently even gotten comfortable with the idea of endurance. But I think that for everybody, that being stronger it's going to help you so much. Like, for instance, when I stopped doing CrossFit, because I did CrossFit for a while and I was competitive. And when I stopped doing CrossFit and I got stronger and then I would do a CrossFit workout, I would do very well. And I really do think it's because of my strength, because when you're having to do, snatches with 135 pounds and, you're really strong, you're not going to be as tired because it just feels so much lighter. So you can argue that, yeah, you need to have that base of conditioning, but if you're strong, then some of this stuff just feels really light. So I think it's definitely very important, and you can keep it simple, overhead pressing, squatting, deadlifting, pull-ups, those things I think are very important movements that should be kind of the cornerstone of anybody's program.
Perfect, Danny. It's fantastic. I've gotten everything that I would like, and I would love to have you on again because I think you're a super big wealth of knowledge that not even I, but a lot of the people can learn a hell of a lot from. And I love your podcast, and I can't say thank you enough for being here with me today.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. I appreciate it. I think it's really cool that you and I are talking. We're on two different continents and we're talking. That's the beauty of, I've been able to meet a lot of cool people and talk to a lot of different people about this stuff. So I would love to be back anytime.
Thank you very much, Dan. And I will look forward to having you on again another time. Thank you for listening to the Primal Persistence podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share the knowledge in this so we can help as many people as possible getting the physical and energy-based power to conquer every obstacle in their way.